Welcome to a new episode of Unfiltered Solopreneur. I'm Nikhil Vaish, your host, founder, and CEO of BoostSolo. My next guest is a transportation nerd, an innovator, and a leader who isn't afraid to take risks. And she's bringing big city solutions to her solopreneur journey in Ohio. Mandy, welcome to the show.
Thank you, Nikhil. I'm so excited to be here. Thank you for having me on the show.
I'm excited for our conversation. So let me jump right in. So you mentioned when we chatted that the first time you started your business, it came with a unique set of challenges, right? So can you talk a little bit about that experience and also how it sort of shifted your perspective on career success and personal growth?
100%. And, we shared this a little bit when I first started. I did this in 2010. And it was out of necessity. I made a mistake. I got a very public DUI during an election year as a leadership professional in public sector. And I had to start my own business in order to be able to actually earn money and survive. And I'm the type of person that, I'm resilient. And I grew up pretty much with my parents being very hands off. They were young when they had me, like 2021. And so they were still growing up themselves, making their own careers. And I always had to do a lot of things on my own, including taking care of my younger sister. And so when I lost my job by my own, mistake, I was like, okay, I got to figure this out. It was 2010. Jobs were scarce. They were, just not available. And so I reached out to my network. It was much smaller back then, but my network came through. One of the engineering and architecture firms that I had worked for prior hired me to do a business strategy for them to grow into a new market that they weren't in. And that was successful. My former boss that ultimately left my prior employer, she ended up hiring me about 8 months after I started it. And that's really where I found that support. And it showed me the value of the network. And I'm experiencing that same type of success today because all the people that I talk to and learn from and have worked with and that I've shown my value to. And it's really changed my perspective. I had to grow a lot in that time while I was still hurting and still in pain. But sometimes you just have to kind of put one foot in front of the other in order to get through the day. And each day becomes easier. You learn more, you reflect more. And I'm a firm believer in everyone has a path. And that was meant to be my path. As painful as it has been and was at the time, I'm in the right place for me.
Yeah, no, thank you for sharing that story. And I have to say, I think that's, again, a common thread I'm finding in all these conversations is, there are people who sort of you almost like feel debilitated by something bad that happens and it stymies them. And there are others who sort of use it as fuel and it sort of builds resilience, right, to take the next leap. And I think that's a common thread with solopreneurs.
Awesome. I think I see that in a lot of the people that I'm meeting through my journey. Yeah. I didn't realize how many independents and solopreneurs were out there until I restarted this business here early in 2024. And I'm just finding so many more people, they want more autonomy over their day. They want more autonomy over their life. And they're like, I'm willing to take the risk for me. And so they're doing amazing things as individuals.
Yeah, no, you're absolutely right. And I think it's everyone sort of gets there with a different path, but I think there are some common threads in because the other thing is that most of the people, again, sort of had a seed somewhere there, right? You talked about how you were always very independent. You were sort of like, even the way you were brought up. So it seems like these things gestate within us before we sort of are ready to follow the path that we're led on. So
absolutely.
So you talked about now starting again, right? So you decided to take the solopreneur path again. Now, I guess this time it was of your own choosing and you had a different mindset, right? So that freedom to choose, how did that impact the way you're building this new venture?
So I was working for a late mover in the electric vehicle charging infrastructure market. They were coming in and they were going to leverage a different type of expertise. They already had experience building powered curbside infrastructure, and they wanted to expand into electrification. And so I worked with that company for 18 months in total. But I would say about 7 to 8 months before I chose to leave, I saw that the business model was not politically palatable to the cities and the customers that we were introducing it to, and then it was unlikely to work. And I liked the company; they were a good company, but I went there to do a job, and they offered me another job to do, but it just wasn't of interest to me. So this time, I stepped back. I hired an executive coach to either help me figure out how to make the job that I had work for me or make that company work for me, decide what was my next path. And at a certain point, I was just like, I'm tired of fitting everyone else's culture. I'm a little bit weird. I'm a nerd. I think I have I miss, some social cues on occasion. And I was just like, you know what? I want to create my own culture. And so that means I need to be by myself as my own business owner. And
Right.
so I really looked at what was going to make me successful this time. And I was like, I have a global network heavily focused here in the US and really in North America. And I'm like, you know what? I can do this. I also had a cheerleader. My husband was behind me. He's like, we socialized it together. We worked through those conversations. And he's like, I don't know how this can't be successful. And so when you've got that person that's closest to you going, do it, I decided to go do it.
That's great. And I love the two things you mentioned that I think are really important. You mentioned the network twice, right? So I think that is a critical component for anything that you do, right? Even now, like looking for jobs, networks are typically how you move anywhere. And then the second thing is having cheerleaders, right? I always say that you need a cheerleader and you need a truth teller, right? So I have two types of people that I sort of surround myself with. But you need both of them, I think, when you're on this journey.
I
Um,
think I think sometimes the cheerleaders are also the truth tellers.
yeah, that's good then if you have two in one. So, uh, so, so when you started this new venture, what expectations did you have about running your business this time around, and how is that compared with the reality now?
So I had expectations of making $0 this year. Even though I planned to do B2B sales and had the opportunity to socialize it, I was like, okay, I saved enough runway to be, not paid at all this year. That being said, because I'd had time to socialize this with my network before I actually went out on my own, I had my first contract day 5. It was a good friend, someone that was like, hey, I can do this work, but I don't really have time. I know you can do it and you'll do it well. And so I did that quick turn project. My old company kept me on board because they knew an RFP was coming out that they wanted to respond to with electrification. So I had that support from them. They were actually one of my cheerleaders. And then I had a long time company that I worked for. I've been in the industry 26 years. I've worked with them almost 20 or more, and they hired me to do a market expansion strategy. And these were all people that I had the opportunity to socialize this with in advance. And so I, it's exceeded my expectations. I was hoping to make some money this year, and I did. I was able to pay most of my bills out of revenue as opposed to savings, and that was a good place to be.
That's great. That's great. And I like how you sort of also gave yourself a runway, right? A lot of people, because somebody I talked to recently said, they thought as soon as you build it, as soon as you launch it, they will come. And it doesn't quite work that way, right?
It doesn't. And, I've been in public sector and private sector. And
Right.
so I know how long the public sector, how long it takes them to move. Some organizations are faster than others. I also know as a consultant how painful it can be waiting on a project to be billable to. And that's challenging. And so the B2B sales strategy was to get early revenue in the door. And then over the course of this last year, I had no expectations of winning a public project this year. I've won 3, two as a
Wow.
sub, two as a sub consultant to great companies that like have supported me, and one as a prime with some of those same companies as my subcontractors. So, and they're now, they're of course partners. And so it's been an amazing experience. I've been very humbled by the generosity and kindness and the willingness of my network to support me.
Yeah, well, I mean, obviously you're doing something right, though, right? Because it's like there's one thing to have support, but people don't necessarily work with you unless you're providing value. So I think testament to you and kudos to you. Um,
Yeah.
so I want to talk. I want to touch on branding for a little bit now because obviously that's my passion. So now navigating something as public as a DUI requires a lot of resilience and self-reflection that you just touched on a minute ago, right? So how have you sort of incorporated that level of transparency and honesty into your brand at Forward Momentum?
Um, I guess the biggest thing for me is like I'm very well known in the community, and I'm 14 years beyond that DUI now.
Yeah,
Um, and if there's something that I need to share with someone, like, hey, if I think I do a lot of high profile projects, and if I think that's relevant to the profile of the project, I let them know. I share the
sure.
full experience, and I'm very transparent. That being said, having gone through that experience, when I thought about the name of the company and the branding, I really wanted to leave that behind in some ways, but also honor the experience because it just did change who I was and who I am. I would say I was fairly brazen in my young age, and I've become, a little more diplomatic, a little more, well, actually, a lot more, and a lot more discerning in how I approach business. And so, really, just letting people know I'm here to get the job done. If they need to know the background, I certainly disclose it. But for the most point, people are like, "Oh my gosh, I forgot about that. I remember." So
Yeah, no, that's great, and I love that you sort of wear your mistake on your sleeve, right? We all make mistakes. We're all human, so it's part of who we are. And people sort of worry about burying those types of things, but people in the internet age, it's hard to do that, right? People are going to find what they find, so it's
they
better to
are.
deal with it. Yeah,
And I think the biggest thing that I took away from that is I wasn't managing my stress well. I was managing it in an appropriate manner. And so I manage my stress differently now. I try not to do things, at a certain, my executive coach always told me, she's like, you're going to have to figure out how to say no. I'm getting to the point where people are calling me a lot to join teams. And now I have to go, okay, what's the timing? What's the expectation? Is there a heavy travel requirement? And I have to really, be a little bit more discerning about what I take on because I don't want to under deliver to the clients that I have, and then ultimately end up stressed out and dealing with things in a way that's not healthy.
yeah, no, and I also love the brand name and the sort of the thinking behind it that you just mentioned. Now, something's obviously working with the brand, right? People are coming to you. Can you talk? You touched on something else that was interesting to me. Is you also have a diverse background. Not many people have worked in the public and private sector, right? So, how do you sort of infuse that into Forward Momentum? And can you talk a little bit about what you think is resonating with people in terms of your brand and your solo journey? Yeah,
Absolutely, Nikhil. I think the things that's number one, I incorporate my public sector experience in a way that shares that I'm in service of you. I come from like a lot of my clients. They're attracted to me because I've been on their side of the table,
right.
and they like that understanding. Now, coming from public sector, you don't always have the credibility of having produced. And so they also see that consulting background where I've been in and out of, consulting, and they're like, okay, she's actually done this before and not just for short stints. So that brings credibility and people's understanding that I can get the job done. Um, what was the other part of the question?
No, and I asked how you sort of differentiate yourself using those two because you have public and private sector experience, right?
Yep. Yep.
Yeah,
And that's really how I
Mhm.
differentiate myself is that I have that strong understanding of
Of both
government,
sides,
and
right?
I've got understanding at local government, state government, and because the state agency that I worked with was heavily dependent on federal funds, the Ohio Department of Transportation, I have I'm very well versed in the federal processes and federal regulations as well.
And how has your experience been? Because I mean, one of the challenging things is when you are working for a company, you're sort of shepherding someone else's brand, right? But now you're actually building your own brand, right? And you are the brand in many ways.
Yes. And I think
So,
it evolves. It
yeah,
evolves every day.
yeah,
At first I was kind of going, hey, I was the first three clients I had, they knew my reputation and they were buying that as Mandy Bishop, you know. And now these public sector clients that I have both in Canada and the US, they're going, okay, we're getting to learn a little bit about forward momentum. Okay, she's a driver. And it's starting to evolve into, okay, she's someone that can get things done. They're
Right.
starting to see that. And they're like, okay, forward momentum, you're going to drive our project forward. And it's resonating with people. But it's all me behind it. And
Yeah.
I'm the driver.
Okay. And so you've managed extensive like programs with like big budgets and tight deadlines.
Yes.
So let me ask you, what's been the biggest mindset shift you've had to make moving from that environment to like really your own business solo?
I'm accustomed to working in a team environment. And so it's been a little, and some days it's daunting in a
Yeah.
way that I'm the accountant, I'm the CEO, I'm the account specialist that has to do the billing. I'm also the project manager. And so I just have to, but on the flip side of that, it also resonates with my background where I'm a jack of all trades. And so when you're involved in those big projects that are $400 or $500 million, you have to be very nimble and diverse. In most cases, you want to be well planned, but you know as well as I do, you have to be reactive.
Yeah.
And so I'm very good at balancing the work that I need to do, prioritizing my time to meet expectations, both mine, my my actual CPAs, and the clients as well. And so I think managing those big projects really helps me manage a big program by myself, where I'm going to have, mostly 3 to 4 active clients at any one time.
Yeah, and that's another thing. I think it's like A is managing lots of different parts and pieces. A lot of people struggle with that. And the other thing is being able to wear different hats, right? Because I mean, that's one thing I remember famously for many years. Silicon Valley wanted only specialists. And then they realized they need people who are generalists who can manage a bunch of different specialties, right? Because specialists can't do that. So it is a valuable skill set, I think, that gets sort of underrated.
Well, Nikhil, I think solopreneurs are the definition of cross functional. We
Yeah,
have to be.
true. And jugglers, maybe, right? That would be the
Yes,
other thing I would say. Yeah, we always have many balls in the air. So,
absolutely.
so this time, so your recent journey was there a moment early in this journey? And I know you said you weren't expecting to do a lot of revenue this year. That sort of made you question your path. And did you have to? How did you push through it, if there was?
Yes, I would say after I won my first public project as a subcontractor, there was a big gap from, say, June until late September, early October, where I didn't win anything new. And I was starting to think of those three little letters, WTF. What did I do? I should have just taken a job. It's so much more secure. And I was starting to get anxiety. And I was very, very busy all the way through August and then mid September. And I was like, you know what? I've got to reposition my thinking here. This is exactly why you did this. You did this to have some time off. And so you're wrapping up a project. You're going to be done with some travel mid September. Take the time off. And
Right.
so I took a full week off and did nothing except lay at my pool and do yard work and just the things that I've wanted to do. And then I worked lightly for 2 other weeks. And then lo and behold, I one of the projects that we had submitted on in August, they were like, "Hey, we won. We're ready to go. We already have the MSA and the notice to proceed." And so now I'm busy again. But it's 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 being it's remembering what your why was. I want autonomy over my day, and I wanted more time to do the things that were important to me. And so sometimes when you have that downtime, you're like, "Oh my gosh, I'm useless. I'm not doing anything." Do the things for yourself.
Yeah, wise. You're way ahead of a lot of us, right? Because I think one of the things people sort of forget is when, because as a solopreneur, you're doing a lot of things, and it's almost like you feel guilty when you're not doing something. And also, you can work 7 days a week, right? Because there are really no boundaries. There's nobody to say yes or no. So, and I think we tend to forget. And I love that you sort of remind yourself of the why, because the reason most of us did this is like we could get up in the middle of this podcast and go buy groceries, right? If we wanted to, we had
Exactly.
that option. whereas a lot of people, if you're working for somebody, you don't. And so I love that you remind yourself of that, and I need to do more of that. So
Yeah.
thank you for reminding me. Um, so, so let me ask you now, in terms of uh, what's been one unexpected personal growth moment you've had in this recent journey?
Oh, goodness. I don't know if I've had any unexpected ones. No, I think it's finally, I think it's back to something you said earlier that clearly my brand and really my work ethic is resonating with people. I am starting to realize that as people come to me with projects, I am a recognized expert in intelligent transportation, in large program delivery. And I think that has it's been humbling, but it's also been like, uplifting as well and making me feel really good. And I think that was a surprise to me because I forget how much I've been in the industry over 25 years. I've built a lot of things or contributed to a lot of policy documents, etc. And for others that I haven't worked with in a while to go, hey, we need you on this project. Like my friend, she owns an engineering firm out in Denver, and she just called me and she's like, I need you. I need you in this role. You're the only one with this expertise. We can do all these things, but you've got that big holistic perspective. And that's awesome that these people are calling me to be their expert on their team.
That's awesome. And so you might have a very fun answer for my next question, which is like, what aspects of your consulting practice are you finding most challenging to build right now? Now, you may say it's turning down work, right? From the way things are going.
I think that is the thing that is right now I'm saying yes to pretty much everything as long as I have the bandwidth. If it
Yeah.
interests me, I'll do it. Um I think I ultimately longer term, probably next 3 to 5 years, I want to be a consultant to businesses that help and help them grow and scale. And I've got a line on some B2B work really helping. They're beyond the startup phase, but they're not at the scaled phase where they're really integrating in it. And they're focusing on government sales and they've never been in government. So helping them understand, like, here's how you get programmed into projects. How's you get programmed into the capital improvement plan. It's still going to be competitive selection, but this is a 3 to 5 year play.
Yeah.
And that's the type of work I ultimately want to do. Although I'm a builder at heart, so I love building and developing things. So I'm always going to struggle to say no to that stuff. But that part is taking longer to cultivate because I started at the end of January. Businesses are doing their budgets right now, and they're like, hey, first of the year, we want to engage. But I've got a couple lines on things like that that I'm working on, but that's been the harder part of my business. If that had taken off from the get go, I probably wouldn't have pursued a lot of public sector work. But at the end of the day, I'm a public servant at heart, so I really enjoy that aspect as well.
Yeah, and the other thing which you said is really interesting is someone also told me that the business you have, 6 months from now and 1 year from now is going to be totally different. And you just said it a few minutes ago that we keep evolving, right? And our business keeps evolving too. As you take on new business, you sort of figure out what paths to take, and it sort of helps you shape that journey.
Yeah, I wholeheartedly agree, Nikhil.
Okay, so let me ask you. So, looking ahead now, where do you see forward momentum in 5 years from now? Are they like, what sort of challenges and opportunities are you excited about tackling?
Well, I might be on a beach in St. Kitts if I keep getting all that. No, I'm kidding. I think in 5 years, I'm seeing me more at the level that I just described, working with businesses, more as a strategic advisor, and really working with government in that strategic advisory role, helping them like assess what they really want to do and getting them started off on the right foot, like really laying the groundwork, the foundations to help them build big things. And that's where I really want to be because, I mean, just for context, my husband can retire. He's been a public servant his entire career. He's still pretty young, but he can retire any day. And so at a certain point, I want to be more in that strategic advisory role and not so much in the production delivery role, because
Right.
that's where I want to evolve as a professional.
And what's your idea of retirement, if I might ask? Is it lying on a beach?
I've never really been much. I mean, I like to lay on a couch on a Saturday and binge watch as much as anybody else. But I can't be idle here,
Yeah.
you know. And so I actually have a mentor here. I met him through my Dublin project, Dublin, Ohio, and he still takes on 3 months, maybe 1 3 month engagement a year just to stay sharp, exercise these skills. He loves it. And so my idea of retirement, like full time, is probably not until someone's rolling me out to the grave.
I go ahead. Sorry, were you going to say something?
No, I think that's good.
No, I can relate to that because I always say my idea of retirement is working on the projects that I love, right? So being able to choose those, because I
Yeah.
agree, it's like that.
And I
That
think
is good.
no, I think you know how like people retire and they fail retirement.
Yeah.
I don't think you and I will fail retirement. It may not be in a paid capacity, but we'll always be working on the things we love. Um, and I mean, I will probably retire or back off, sometime in my 60s. But at the end of the day, I can't see putting this to bed for a while.
Oh, so you got another 30 years, Mandy. Nothing to worry about. So,
Uh, I wish.
so let me ask you, if you could offer one piece of advice to someone wanting to start their solopreneur journey, what would you say to them?
I would really say, do what I did. Define your why. Why do you want to do this? I would really ask yourself, why do you think you're going to be successful? I would also say, if you don't have a network, don't do this. Go work for someone for a while. You and I have talked about that, Nikhil.
Yeah.
Get that experience. And actually, the experience is secondary to the network. The network is what they're going to see you in your work, and they're going to be like, oh my God, they're so good. And they're going to share those experiences with others. And as you build out your network, you're going to have 5, 10, 100 people that can say that same thing about you and connect you to other people. Like they may not need your service, but someone they know might. And that is, those are three key things that I would do.
Yeah, no, that's really great advice. In fact, it reminds me of a LinkedIn study where they found that the people who were looking for jobs were more likely to find it from a secondary connection in their network.
Mhm.
So the value of the network is really, I think, extremely important. And I agree with you about, we talked about that. Work somewhere, figure that out first before you take the leap. So
Yeah.
is there anything else you'd like to share with our listeners that we haven't covered?
Um, I, I think the biggest thing when you're doing solopreneur is one of the things I'd remind people is get out of your house. Um, you know, you need that. So I know a few people that don't need social interaction, but they're few and far between. But you do need that interaction. Join groups that align with your interests in business that can help also create bigger networks for you. Or they might even be clients. I'm talking to one industry group right now. They don't want to hire an engineer, but they need someone to advise them.
Right.
And so for me, that would be like, a monthly stipend and in an advisory role, a few hours a month just to help them out. And I love that type of work. So really get out of your house, join the groups that are working in your industry. I would also say I've joined too many groups this year, too many organizations. And so as I start to pay my dues at the end of this year, I'm going to go, okay, what's a value? Where do I really want to invest my time? And start to cut a few of them out here over the course of the next year.
Yeah, that makes a lot of sense. And again, those are things you're passionate about, right? So it doesn't feel like work in that sense.
Yes,
But don't spread yourself too thin, is what I also heard. Yeah.
that is 100%.
So I love to end with a little rapid fire round. So I'm just going to throw a couple of questions at you and just give us whatever comes to your mind. So if your entrepreneurial journey was a mode of transportation, what would it be?
A scooter.
Okay. Is zipping around, getting through traffic. I like that. If you could go back to any era and introduce one modern technology, what would it be and why?
Ooh, that is such a good one. I think I'd want to go back to the 50s and introduce the smartphone. Actually, maybe the 80s and introduce the smartphone. My teachers always told me I wouldn't have a computer with me every single time. And you know, I, I, I do now have a computer with me every single time.
Well, and maybe now they wouldn't have to get rid of them in classrooms, right? We would have figured it out by now.
Exactly.
So if Forward Momentum had a mascot, what would it be and why?
Oh, you know what? It'd be a cat.
A
And
cat?
it'd be a cat. I feel like they're super intelligent. They're a little aloof, but they're there when you need them.
All right, I'm going to close my dog's ear, who's sitting right next to me here, so she can't hear that. If you could invite one historical innovator to help guide your company's vision, who would it be?
I think I would have to go back all the way to, oh my gosh, you're going to have to help me here, Nikhil. The, the most famous innovator of all. He was in, oh my gosh,
What did he invent?
he invented everything. It's
Oh,
the guy, the picture of the man with like all the arms. And it was the theme of a
oh, Da
movie.
Vinci.
Da Vinci. Sorry.
Leonardo da Vinci. Yeah.
I
Oh,
think I would want to go back to that era. He was like a serial entrepreneur and serial innovator. And he just like, I think he was almost clairvoyant. Just with like his vision.
yeah, and we're still trying to figure out some of the things he invented, right? We still haven't figured out how he did them, like the Shroud of Turin, for example. Um,
Yes. I got
if so,
caught up in the Da Vinci Code.
yeah, I don't blame you. And I actually hadn't thought of him as an inventor, but you're absolutely right. He was probably one of the most genius inventors we've ever had. Um, so if you had an unlimited budget for one day, what's the first thing you'd invest in for your business?
If I had an unlimited budget, this is going to sound odd. I'd invest in a foundation to support people. I'm very focused on outcomes and impact in the community. And a foundation may not seem like something that would support my business, but it would improve people's lives, and therefore it helps me like spread what I do in a community.
I love that. It's and I think it's also as testament to why people are reaching out to you and what you're doing is resonating, right? Because you're putting that first. So and it comes through. So Mandy, thank you so much for the conversation today. I really enjoyed it. You've given us our listeners a lot of wonderful wisdom and tips. So I appreciate that.
Well, thank you so much for having me on. I'm really excited to be one of your first guests on Unfiltered Solopreneur. And I wish you well, and I hope you continue to have like amazing conversations.